Stop using the Amazon console to build EC2 instances. Use Terraform instead. As a developer, you spin up lots of EC2 instances. You go to the console, you set up the properties, you select an instance, and you wait for it to start. Let me show you how to quickly and easily do this with Terraform. All right, let's dive in. I've created this Terraform AWS EC2 repository, and we're going to work from this. Let me go check this out. I'm going to clone the project, and in here, we'll start creating our Terraform application. I'm going to open this up using IntelliJ. IntelliJ has a very nice Terraform editor, and we're going to use that for this project. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new Terraform file in here. And I'm going to create a main Terraform. So it's going to be main.tf. And this is going to be the starting point. Okay, we have our main TF file. I'm also going to create another file. And this is going to be called the provider TF file. In this provider TF file, I'm going to actually define that we're going to use AWS as a provider for these services. So I'm going to say provider, AWS. And these are YAML, so it indents 2 spaces. And for me, my region is US East 1. Now in here, I could define my secret and information for credentials for AWS, but I've already set those up using AWS configure. So those are already in my home directory. So I can use those by saying shared config file out of my home. Okay, so tilde/.aws.creds is where these are found. Okay, now that we have the provider file, we can actually go through and we can initialize Terraform. So I'll go into this directory and I will say Terraform init. I have an error here. This should be AWS, not AWD. Let's try this again. This will go through and grab all the files I need from HashiCorp for AWS. Okay, great. So initialize successfully. So our next step is to go through and start looking at the main. In our main, we want to go through and create an EC2 instance. I'm going to put a comment in here. I'm going to say create EC2 instance. So we're going to create a resource. So we use a resource tag, AWS _, and we get a little bit of autocomplete in here now. This is going to be an AWS instance. And what do we want to call this name? I'm going to call it TJC _EC2. There we go. And we need to define some items in here. And in this case, I need to give it an AMI. So the AMI I'm going to give it is based on Amazon Linux. And this is an AMI that I've been using, and it's available in my region. In addition, I need to give it a instant type. And for that, I'm going to use T2 micro, but I need to define a few more parameters. I want to create that from a variable. So I'm going to say var.ec2 size. It's not a string. Now it needs to get that somewhere. Notice it's in red. In addition, I need to use a key name, and I'll say var.keyname. And there's some other information that I'll need to set up here in a minute, but let's start with this. So now I need to create another file over here, and I'm going to call it variables.tf. And in this variables.tf, I need to add a handful of variables. So some things I need to add in here will be a variable, and this is going to be for the EC2 size. And we need to have a type, and this is going to be string. We need to have a default value. In this case, it's going to be t2.micro. And we can give it a description as well. And I believe that's a 1 gig 1v CPU instance. Okay, and we had another parameter that we set up in here in the main, and we call it the key name. I'm going to need the PEM file, and right now I don't have that defined. I have a PEM file called tj.pem, and that is in my home directory. That is in my home directory. So that's where the file is. And let's go ahead and go into Amazon real quick so we can understand a little bit about what we're doing here. I'm going to go to the EC2 console. And in here, I have some PEM files to find in key pairs. And you go to the correct region. And the name of the key pair I want to use for the server is TJC. So that's where that name comes from. So let's hop back over here. And so I need the key name. And so in variables, I need to define another variable that's going to be called key name. And I'm just going to give it a default name, TJC. Okay. And the next thing I need to do is I need to give a key path as well. And I'm just going to say default again, tilde/tjc.pem. That's where we found the file at the operating system. Okay, so we have those two items defined now. Let's go back into our main, and we have our key name. So at this point, we can actually run this, and we should be able to go into our Terraform and do a Terraform plan. And this will go through, and this will check our file to see where it's at right now, if we have any syntax errors. So here we can see that I have a syntax error for the shared config file. It doesn't like something here. And let's take a look and see what that is. So I'm calling shared config file, but it's an array, so that actually needs to be a plural. So there's my S, there we go. So let's go try this again. We'll run the Terraform plan. Okay, this looks good. So we have all sorts of stuff going on, and Terraform appears that it's about ready to run. So on our providers, we should be done there. In our next step, on our main, we have various attributes in here, and I can add some various tags in here. For example, I can give it a tags, and I'm going to call this one here name. I'm going to say Terraform EC2. So we have a name here. And now we have all sorts of other information that we typically need to set up for this. But for now, we should be able to actually run this, and the instance should be created. Let's run the plan again. Okay, looks good. Let's go to our EC2 console, and let's see how that looks real quick. We'll look at our instances. We only have 2 instances right now. I'm going to go ahead and run this. I will do a Terraform apply. And when I do this, it'll go through and it'll prompt me to complete this or not. And I have to say yes, Y-E-S. And it will actually go through and create this instance for us. Okay, so we now have one resource added. So let's take a look at this over here now. Let's refresh our console. And we can see that we actually have it and it's running. So let's see if we can open that up. Let's do a connect. And we'll very quickly see that we have the server up and running here. Nothing really going on. Few processes running. And this is the server we just created. Great. So there's a handful of other things that might be nice to do. Let's close this connection here. We'll go back to our instances. And now that we have this running, let's actually stop that. And we can do Terraform destroy. So after you're done with an instance, you can actually turn it all off with a Terraform destroy. And once again, it's going to ask you for permission. So yes. In a moment, it should shut down that instance. That way we can quickly start up an instance, do our work, and shut down an instance. Okay, let's go back up to our console, refresh that. We can see the instance is now terminated. Great, we're making good progress. Now, on our overall Terraform, there might be several things that we want to do. We can add in various elements, and let's make sure that we have port 80 and port 22 open. We can set up some security groups for this. I'm going to add in my main a security group. I'm going to call it AWS Security Group, Tom's SG. Notice this doesn't exist yet. So let's go through and create another file in here. We'll call it security.tf. And in this security file, I'm going to go ahead and add an AWS security group. And this is Tom-SG. So now if we go back over here, that's no longer red. So here's a security. And within this security, we need to add a couple attributes. Let's give it a name. And now that we have that, we need to give it some ingress ports coming in, and some egress ports. So from the input, I'll map port 80, the whole world can come in, and port 22, the whole world can come in. And then going out, we can go out to the world. So this sets up our basic security. So that's great. So now let's take the next step. And whenever we launch this, it would be awful nice to know if we knew the IP address. Well, I'd create another file here. I'm going to call it outputs.tf. And in our outputs.tf, I'm going to add some information that I want. And specifically, I want the public IP. So I'm going to create a public IP, and that value is going to be the AWS instance.tjcec2 .public IP. So AWS instance TJEC2 is AWS instance dot TJEC2 is where that comes from. So we take the space out and add a dot in there. Okay, so now let's go back and let's run this. We're going to do the apply again. And this time, I don't want to have to actually type in the yes, so I can actually put in there auto approve. Now notice as we go through and run this, it creates a few files. One of the files it creates is the Terraform state. And this will tell me all about the current state. It also has a state backup. The great thing about Terraform is you can go through and make a change and run the apply again, and it will do an update. So as we go through here in a moment, we'll see there's three things that it can do. There's a add to Atom's resources, changed, and destroyed. Okay, so now we have this up and running, and notice our public IP is now printed. This is great. So we have our public IP printed, and I could SSH into this. I happen to know that the default user is EC2-user, so that's who I want to connect as. But maybe our next thing we want to do is SSH into this, and I want to use SSH, and I know I need to use that PIM file, so I could type SSH-I, the PIM file name, etc. But since I don't want to type that PIM file name every time to SSH and to SFTP, I have a script I call yak, because every time I type this in and it doesn't work, I type, oh, yak. So I have a script called yak, and what that does, my bin directory, is it does SSH add my TJ PIM file. So if I just type yak, it gets in there, and now it's live for my session. Now I can just SSH EC2-user at, remember our outputs right here. Now just connect it up to that machine. Now I'm on that machine. There we go. Nothing exciting whatsoever happening. So that's basically how you can set up and tear down an EC2 instance. You can also go through, just like you did the apply with the auto approve. We can do the destroy with the auto approve. And this will tear it down here. There's got to be a little bit more to it. I mean, this is interesting, and we've set up some security. We've seen an output. We set up a provider. We even have some variables. But what else can we do to it? Well, when we install something, we might want to have a script run on that server. That's easy to do with Terraform. With Terraform, we can very quickly do a connection and then execute something remotely. So let me set up two things I want to do. I want to copy a file over there, and then I want to execute that file. So first of all, let me set up a file locally, and I'm going to call that setup-ec2. I'm going to put that in my home directory, setup ec2, and I'm going to do whoami into /temp/whoami.txt. So this is going to execute and create this. Okay, so to do this, we're going to go into the EC2 instance again, and we're going to add some information in here under the tag. And the first thing we're going to do is copy this file. So we're going to say is where the source is on this machine and where I want it to go to on the destination. So I want to copy this to the temp directory. And the next thing I need to do is set up how we actually connect. So I need a connection block in here. So let's create a connection. I'm going to connect through SSH. The user is the EC2 user, just like I SSH'd a minute ago. The key file, remember we just defined this in our variables, and that's the tj .pem file. And the host is going to be this EC2's blocks public IP. So we're going to connect up to this, and we're going to send that file over there. All right, so let's actually go through and let's see if we can run this, and we'll do auto apply. So we're applying this with auto approve. Now notice that if I want to SSH into this again, the IP address has changed, because actually we tore down the instance and we restarted it. So now we have a different IP address. And notice we're only using the instance when we start it. We do the apply and it starts, and then we tear it down when we're finished. So we can save a ton of money on our EC2 bills. No more forgetting an instance and letting it run overnight once you're done with it. Okay, so we have the public IP address again. And let's go through and SSH into this guy again with a different IP address. And what are we looking for? We want to go to the temp directory, and we're looking for this setup EC2 sh. Okay, and notice in this directory there's no file who am I, because it wasn't executed. Great. So let's go through and let's tear this down. So we'll do Terraform destroy, auto approve. And the next thing we want to do is fire this guy. We want to actually make it execute. So we copied the file down, and it's just a regular file as far as the system's concerned. It is not executable. So the first thing we have to do is we'll have to fire off a remote execution with the remote execute tag, and then we'll have to change the mode, and then we'll run that. And since we've logged in as the EC2 user, I'm going to run an sudo so this script runs as root. So we're going to change the permission and the remote execute plus X, make this executable. Then we're going to run this as a root. Okay, so let's go through and let's run this. Terraform apply, auto approve. I'm going to create some notes in here. And in these notes, I'm going to put in here, create provider.tf, then initialize with Terraform init. Then after we have that, we could do Terraform plan. Check files. Apply. And we're doing apply, auto approve, and then destroy. And that is Terraform destroy with auto approve. Again, we have a new IP address. So now we're going to SSH into this again using that new IP address. I'll put this into the notes as well. We'll SSH into it. Now we'll go into the temp directory, and here we will see setup.sh file, and we'll see the whoami txt. Okay. Great. So, all exciting. We've seen how this basic stuff works. We can see the whoami belongs to root. The setup EC2 is the EC2 user. We could use a setup we wanted to load Java, what other support we needed, Nginx, etc. Or we could use Ansible, which is my preference. So there you go, a little bit of understanding of Terraform for Java developers and how to quickly set up a EC2 instance with Terraform. Hope you enjoyed the video. Take a look at my other videos. Please subscribe. Also take a look at my Udemy channels. Thank you very much.